Why did she freeze at the sound of the fire alarm? It wasn't nerves. It wasn't fear. To everyone else in the Denver VA Medical Center, it was just another drill, another faulty alarm that went off too often to take seriously. But Sarah Martinez felt her body lock, every muscle coiled as if waiting for an impact that never came. Her hands tightened on the edge of her desk until the color drained from her knuckles. Then the scream cut through the hallway. Incoming, everybody down. The voices outside scattered. Shoes pounded linoleum. Desperate breaths filled the corridor. And for a moment, Sarah wasn't in Denver anymore. She wasn't in her quiet little office with its motivational posters and file cabinets. She was somewhere else. Hot air, dust, and the echo of explosions in her chest. Somewhere she had sworn she left behind. But she didn't run. She stood, walked toward the sound, and for the first time since she'd stepped into the building as the rookie counselor, she moved like who she really was. The man screaming was trapped in the men's restroom, throwing himself against walls, breaking glass, fighting enemies no one else could see. Security was on edge, hands hovering near tasers. Staff held their distance, whispering. Everyone seemed to agree on one thing, was a problem too dangerous to handle. But Sarah didn't ask permission. She didn't hesitate. She lowered herself to the floor, sat cross-legged outside the door, and began to hum. The guards blinked, confused. Her supervisor, Jim, hissed at her to step back, but she didn't move. The melody was low, steady, almost ritual. It wasn't for them. It was for him. Inside, the man's roar softened into a question. "Who's singing?" Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Just someone who knows that song, someone who's been where you are." Silence, then a broken, disbelieving, You were over there." Sarah closed her eyes. "Yeah," she said simply. 10 minutes later, the same veteran who had been a danger to himself and everyone around him was sitting in her office, drinking water, speaking in broken sentences that slowly, painfully turned into full words. And for 2 hours, she stayed with him. When it was over, her colleagues asked what she'd done. She shrugged, got lucky. But luck had nothing to do with it. That night when she locked her office, she checked the drawer twice. Inside was a small wooden box, heavy, locked with a key she wore on a chain around her neck. She never opened it here, never let anyone see what it contained. But she could feel the weight of it, a reminder of who she had been, what she had carried, and what she was trying so hard to bury. By the next morning, the line outside her door stretched halfway down the corridor. Word had traveled fast. Veterans who had resisted treatment, who mocked the idea of therapy, who had broken counselors with rage and silence. Now they wanted to see her. She hadn't expected that. She wasn't sure she wanted it. But she smiled, unlocked her door, and stepped into the role they believed she could play. Her first appointment that day was canceled. Jim handed her a new file instead. He said, "Goes by tank, 3 tour in Iraq, Army Ranger, 4 counselors in 6 months. None of them lasted." Sarah studied the notes. IED blast, chronic pain, anger issues, a pattern of broken furniture, threats, a woman so terrified she locked herself in her office until security came. She looked up at Jim. "Why me?" He gave her a tired half-smile. "Because if you're real, you'll handle him. If not, better we find out now." Exactly at 10, the man filled her doorway. 6'4", tattoos crawling across both arms, a limp in his left leg, the kind that spoke of wounds that never truly healed. He didn't sit, didn't even pretend to consider it. "You the miracle worker." His voice rumbled like distant thunder. Sarah gestured to the chair. "Please have a seat." "It's Tank." He paced instead, each heavy step like a warning. "And I don't need some college kid with a degree telling me how to fix my head." Her pen hovered over the file. "What makes you think I have a degree?" He laughed bitterly. "Because that's what you all are. Fresh out of school, writing your papers on PTSD without ever meeting someone who has it." She waited, calm, unflinching. Tank leaned across the desk, close enough she could feel his breath. "Lady, I've been in firefights that lasted 18 hours. I've carried my brothers through streets lined with snipers. I've killed men with my bare hands when my weapon jammed. You don't know anything about the real world." Then his arm swept across the desk, sending her mug to the floor in a shattering crash. Hot coffee splattered across the wall. Her reaction was nothing. She didn't flinch. She didn't even look up. She calmly reached for napkins, cleaned the spill, tossed them in the trash, and asked, "Feel better?" The giant blinked. For the first time, his script didn't work. "You just wanted to see if I'd run like the others," she said, still wiping the floor. "Reasonable test. Intimidation works in combat zones, but this isn't one." "It's Tank," he growled again, but softer now, less certain. She looked at him with steady eyes, then asked the one question no therapist had ever asked him. "What's your body count?" The words hit like a bullet. He froze, staring at her, lost. "You can't, nobody asks that." "I just did," she clicked her pen. 12, 15 more." His mouth opened, closed, then whispered, 12 confirmed." She nodded, wrote it down. "I stopped at 15. Tank blinked. What did you say?" 15 confirmed, she repeated, matter of fact. After that, it was too chaotic to keep records. Combat medics don't usually count. But when you're running casualty evacuation under fire, you remember. Numbers stick. For the first time since he entered, Tank sat. Hard. His world tilting as he stared at this woman who didn't look old enough, didn't look enough, didn't look like anything he expected, and yet carried the truth in her voice like it weighed her down every day. "Now," she said, steady as stone, "do you want to keep playing the intimidation game, or do you want to tell me why you're really angry?" Tank stared, then he dropped his gaze. Outside her office, the hallways buzzed with whispers. A rookie who had walked into a fire alarm breakdown and walked out with. A rookie who sat unshaken before a man called Tank. A rookie who didn't seem to be a rookie at all. Sarah ignored the whispers. She had paperwork, sessions, responsibilities. But when she locked her office that night, she touched the key around her neck again, feeling the weight of the box in her drawer. It wasn't luck. It wasn't training you got from a textbook. It was muscle memory. It was scars hidden under sleeves. It was memories that woke her at night. And she told herself again, the same lie she always did. They don't need to know. Because if they knew, they'd see the truth she couldn't bear to carry anymore. Why did she move like that, so fast, so precise, when everyone else froze? The weekly group therapy session had begun like all the others. A circle of mismatched chairs, veterans who hated being there but had no choice, and Sarah Martinez with her clipboard and calm, steady eyes. They started with check-ins. Spoke first, his voice a little stronger than the week before. "I actually slept through the night, no nightmares," a flicker of pride in his eyes, hope. And then, a sharp crack outside, a car backfiring in the parking lot. It should have been nothing, but in that room, for Jimmy, it was everything. One moment he sat still. The next, his body snapped into combat mode with terrifying speed. His voice, commanding, trained, urgent, filled the room. "Contact left, VC in the tree line, get down." Chaos detonated. Chairs clattered. Dove for cover, shaking. Maria Santos pressed against the wall, breath rapid, near hyperventilating. Others bolted for the door. And Jimmy, 70 years old, wiry but forged in the jungles of Vietnam, launched across the circle with the ferocity of a man defending his platoon. His eyes burned wild, and to him, Tank wasn't a fellow veteran. He was an enemy. The impact shook the floor. Jimmy tackled Tank, hands clawing for his throat, screaming, "Not one more, you won't take another one of my boys." Tank struggled, not fighting back, not wanting to hurt the old man, but pinned, hampered by his injured leg, his strength offset by Jimmy's desperate fury. The room filled with shouting, panic, fear. Nobody knew what to do. Nobody except Sarah. She didn't scream, didn't freeze, didn't wait for security. She flowed forward like time itself had slowed, dropped to the ground behind Jimmy, slid her arm around his neck. Not a choke, not violence, something controlled, exact. A sleeper hold applied with perfect precision, just enough pressure to cut off blood flow, not air. 4 seconds, that was all it took. Jimmy's body went limp. Sarah rolled him carefully into the recovery position, checking his vitals, her hands moving with practiced efficiency. Calm voice, steady breath, not a flicker of fear. "Tank, you okay?" Tank coughed, rubbing his throat, staring at her in disbelief. Yeah. Sarah called, still monitoring Jimmy. First aid kit on the wall now. The young veteran snapped out of his panic, moving fast, steady for the first time in weeks. "Maria, I need your help here. Pressure on this wound." He hit the table, going down. Maria, trembling but driven by training, knelt beside her, hands steadying as she pressed gauze against Jimmy's forehead. When security burst in, tasers drawn, they found not chaos but order. A circle of veterans moving in sync under Sarah's quiet command. An unconscious man cared for, not subdued. "What happened here?" the officer barked. Sarah looked up briefly, her voice even. Flashback, he's stable now. Needs evaluation for concussion, the cuts superficial. The guards stared. They had seen Jimmy's breakdowns before. It usually took 3 of them and a taser to bring him down. And she had done it alone. "Where the hell did you learn that?" the officer pressed. Sarah's hands never paused in their checks. Her answer came without hesitation. YouTube. But Tank wasn't buying it. He watched her, suspicion cutting through his usual anger. The way she moved, the speed, the precision, the calm in chaos. He'd seen that before, not in classrooms, not online, in combat zones. Later, when the others had gone, when Jimmy was safe and was finally breathing normal, Tank cornered her in the parking garage. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the concrete. "Going somewhere, Doc." His massive frame blocked her path. She didn't flinch. "It's late, we'll talk tomorrow." "It's Tank." His voice was steady, too steady. "And no, we won't. Tomorrow you'll give me more crap about YouTube and lucky guesses." He stepped closer, moving with the caution of a man on reconnaissance. "I've been asking questions about you." Her grip on her keys tightened. "What kind of questions?" "The kind nobody can answer. No record of you at any of the schools you say you went to. No job history before this place. And yet," his voice sharpened, "you move like someone who's seen combat more than once. You talk about body counts like they're numbers on a grocery list. Who the hell are you really, Sarah Martinez?" Her throat tightened. She tried to push past him, but he shifted, blocking her, not threatening but immovable. "Let me through." "Not until you tell me the truth." His voice cracked then, just a little. Not anger, something else. "Do you have any idea what it's like to finally sit in that chair across from someone who gets it, who doesn't look at me like I'm broken? For the first time in years, I thought maybe I wasn't alone. But if you're lying—" His words faltered, his fists clenched at his sides. He wasn't trying to intimidate her anymore. He was pleading. Sarah swallowed hard. It wasn't an act. "Then prove it." His hand reached out, not to hurt, but to take her wrist gently. His thumb brushed over her skin, and she froze as his fingers found them. The scars, raised ridges hidden under her sleeve, mapped across her arm like secrets carved in flesh. His eyes widened. His gaze traveled to her neck, where even makeup couldn't hide the faint marks near her hairline. "Jesus Christ," he whispered, "shrapnel scars." She tried to pull away, but his grip held, gentle but unyielding. His voice dropped to a command. "Show me." She shook her head. "Show me," he repeated. His eyes didn't hold suspicion anymore. They held hope, desperate, fragile hope. Her chest ached. She could lie again, hide again, pretend again, but looking into his eyes, she knew the lie was crumbling. Slowly she turned, walked to her car and unlocked the trunk. From beneath a spare tire she pulled out a small wooden box, burned, battered like she was. She set it on the hood, unlocked it with the chain around her neck, and opened it. Tank stared, silent. 5 purple hearts. A bronze star. A silver star. A combat medic badge, tarnished by sand and smoke. Her hands trembled as she lifted one. Helmand Province, 3 tour with the 82nd Airborne, casualty evacuation. First medal was a roadside bomb. Spent 6 hours pulling men from burning vehicles under sniper fire. Her voice cracked, then steadied. She lifted another. Second mortar attack. Aid station hit. I kept working while the roof came down around me. Another. Third 14-hour firefight. 8 wounded Marines trapped. I made 19 trips across open ground under fire. 19 I saved. 23 I couldn't. Tank's lips parted, his voice a whisper. 19. Saved, she corrected, tears burning her eyes. She touched the 4th. Suicide bomber, marketplace, civilians. Her hand hovered over the 5th. VBIED, lead truck, that one ended my career. The medals glinted under the harsh lights. Tank looked from the box to her face, as if he were seeing her for the first time. Why hide it, he asked. She closed the box slowly, locked it again, her voice low. Because I didn't want to be the veteran counselor. I wanted to be a counselor who happened to be a veteran. And because every time I wear that uniform in my head, every time I say their names or remember those days, all I see are the ones I couldn't save. Her eyes lifted to his. I came home, they didn't. Tank's face softened. The suspicion in his eyes melted into something else. Respect, recognition, relief. You remember every day, don't you? Every day, she whispered. They stood there in silence. 2 soldiers in civilian clothes, surrounded by concrete and shadows, bound by truths too heavy to carry alone. And in that silence, Tank understood what no one else did. She wasn't a rookie. She was a survivor hiding in plain sight. Why were they whispering her name now, like she was a rumor walking down the hall? By Monday morning, Sarah felt it in the air before she even opened her office door. Conversations cut off when she passed. Veterans tracked her movements, not with suspicion, but with something else: calculation, recognition, curiosity. Some nodded as if they'd known all along. Others stared like they were trying to piece her together for the first time. The box in her trunk had changed everything. Tank knew. And Tank, despite his silence, carried an aura that spoke louder than words. If he had seen her medals, it wouldn't stay between them. Inside her office, someone was waiting. Doctor, Chief of Mental Health Services, known across the VA as sharp, political, immovable. She sat behind Sarah's desk like she owned it, flipping through a thick folder of documents. Miss Martinez, she said, her voice clipped. Or should I say Staff Sergeant Martinez, please sit. Sarah remained standing, military instinct kicking in, spine straight, shoulders squared. Ma'am. Relax, this isn't a court-martial. Finally looked up. Her expression was unreadable. Although I have to admit your file makes fascinating reading. 3 bronze stars, a silver star, 5 purple hearts, an honorable medical discharge. That's quite a record for someone who's been presenting herself as a fresh graduate with no experience. I have a psychology degree, Sarah said carefully. I earned it after my discharge, through the VA's program. University of Colorado, 18 months, 4.0 GPA. Yes, I see that here. Tap the folder. Impressive. But what I don't see is any mention of your military service on your employment application. That omission, Sergeant, is a violation of federal hearing regulations, grounds for immediate termination. The words landed like artillery. Sarah felt her chest tighten, the walls of the office closing in. She'd faced firefights, explosions, ambushes, but this felt like a noose tightening. However, continued, standing smoothly, Before we discuss your employment status, there's someone you should meet." The door opened. A man in an expensive suit entered, flanked by a woman with a camera and another with sound equipment. Staff Sergeant Martinez. The man's smile was politician bright. "Richard, Public Affairs Director. This is Jennifer from Channel 7 News and her cameraman Mike. We're thrilled about the opportunity to work with you." Sarah's jaw clenched. "Opportunity." "Your story," said beaming. "It's exactly what the American people need. A wounded warrior who came home, rebuilt her life, and now heals others. A hero turned healer. It's perfect." Jennifer stepped forward, all enthusiasm. "We'd love to do an interview. Maybe follow you through your day. Show America how veterans like you are leading the way in mental health care. It's inspiring." Sarah didn't move, didn't take the hand extended toward her. "And if I refuse?" Voice cut like a blade. "Then we move forward with termination proceedings for falsifying your application." The silence was suffocating. She could hear her own pulse fast and heavy. This wasn't a firefight, but it felt the same. Pinned down, outnumbered, no cover. "How long do I have to decide?" "The interview is scheduled for this afternoon," said smoothly. "We've already cleared it with your supervisor. This is your chance to help thousands, maybe millions, by sharing your journey." When they left, Sarah sat alone in her office, staring at the small wooden box now on her bookshelf. For years it had been locked away. Now it felt like a spotlight, too heavy to ignore, too dangerous to expose. She didn't notice the knock at first. It was Maria Santos, her patient, Navy Corpsman, survivor's guilt written in her every gesture. Maria stepped inside, frowning. "Sarah, you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." "Something like that." Sarah forced a smile. "Tell me, Maria, if you found out someone you trusted had been lying to you about who they were, how would you feel?" Maria thought for a moment, studying her face. "Depends. Were they lying to hurt me, or to protect themselves?" "Protect themselves," Sarah whispered. "But the lie affected other people too." "Then I'd want the truth, all of it, and after that I'd decide if the person was worth forgiving." Before Sarah could answer, more voices filled the doorway. Tank, massive as ever. Shoulders than she'd ever seen. Jimmy, a bandage still on his forehead, his eyes sharper, clearer. Others pressed in behind them, faces she knew, faces she'd counseled, faces she'd seen on the edge of breaking. Word had spread. "We heard," Tank said, "about the interview, about them threatening your job." Stepped forward. "We also heard about your service record, 5 Purple Hearts." His voice wavered, but his eyes didn't. "Why didn't you tell us?" Sarah's throat tightened. "Because I wanted to help you heal, not compare war stories." "Bullshit," Jimmy's gravelly voice cut through. He pushed his way closer, his stare pinning her. "You didn't tell us because you were protecting us. Same way you protected those 19 soldiers you pulled out of hell." His voice shook. "You think we can't handle knowing our counselor is more messed up than we are?" "Jimmy, let me finish." His tone was sharp, commanding. "You know what I thought when I woke up in the hospital after my episode? I thought about how you took me down without hurting me. How you checked me, cared for me before worrying about anything else. That's not something you learn in school. That's someone who's lived it." He stepped closer. So you remember things you don't want to. So what? You think we do. That's why we're here. That's why you belong here, because you understand." Tank nodded, his voice low but firm. "We've all been talking about how you never flinch, about how you make us feel not broken. You think a resume changes that?" Maria's eyes filled. "You saved me, Sarah, not because you're a decorated war hero, because you saw me, because you knew what it felt like to carry the guilt." His voice cracked, but he held steady. "The media wants a poster child, but we already know who you are. You're the one who sits with us when we can't breathe. You're the one who makes us believe we can get better." Sarah's vision blurred. She looked around the room, faces, eyes haunted, people who had been written off by everyone else. They had become her unit. Her brothers and sisters in a war that never really ended. "They'll fire me if I don't do it," she whispered. "Then we'll make sure they can't," Tank said. His voice carried the certainty of command. "You think the VA wants to explain firing the only counselor who's actually helped. You think they want to face all of us standing together." Jimmy's laugh was rough but real. "Lady, you've been carrying us. Time to let us carry you." For the first time since she'd come home, Sarah felt it, something she thought she'd lost forever. A unit, a circle of people who had her back. She looked at them, broken, stubborn, unflinching, and asked the only question that mattered. "So what do we do?" Tank's grin was slow, predatory. "We go to war, but this time it's for something worth saving." The battle line wasn't in the desert anymore. It was here, in hallways filled with whispers, in offices where suits tried to turn pain into publicity, in the fight to protect one woman's right to heal the way she chose. And Sarah Martinez wouldn't fight it alone. Why did the conference room feel like a battlefield before the fight even began? It was supposed to be simple. A private interview, some flattering words, a segment on the evening news. But when Sarah walked into the third-floor conference room at 2 p.m., she felt the shift immediately. The VA brass were already there, Doctor with her stiff posture, Richard with his practiced smile, the news crew fussing with cables and lights. They looked calm, certain, in control. But then the doors kept opening. First Tank wearing the cleanest shirt he owned, shoulders squared like he was reporting for duty. Then standing than he had in months. Maria in her navy dress blues, medals gleaming. Jimmy in a battered Vietnam cap, eyes sharp. And behind them, dozens more. Veterans Sarah had counseled, veterans who had only heard the rumors, veterans from outside Denver who had driven hours after whispers spread through their networks. The air grew heavy as they filled every chair, lined the walls, stood shoulder to shoulder in the back. A silent unit forming ranks. Smile faltered. Jennifer, the reporter, exchanged a look with her cameraman. "This is highly irregular," snapped. "This was supposed to be a private interview." A grizzled Marine from the back growled, "Nothing private about trying to exploit one of our own. We're here to make sure it gets handled right." Jim, Sarah's supervisor, entered last, carrying a thick stack of files. He didn't sit with the brass. He sat next to Sarah. His voice, when it came, was steady, heavy with decades of service. "Before this circus begins," he said, dropping the stack onto the table, "I think everyone should see these." He handed out reports, surveys, data. Hard numbers no spin could twist. Suicide attempts down 40%. Compliance up 60%. Transfers almost non-existent. "These are the results that matter," Jim said. "Not publicity, not headlines, results." The room shifted. For a moment, Sarah felt something she hadn't in days, vindication. But leaned forward, forcing his politician's smile back into place. "We're not here to argue results. We're here to share a story that could inspire millions. Sergeant Martinez's journey is remarkable. A wounded warrior, decorated, now serving again as a healer." "Could inspire who?" Tank cut him off. His voice was low, dangerous. "Because it sure as hell won't inspire the people in this room. We don't need her turned into some poster child. We need her here doing the work." His hands trembled, but his voice was clear. 6 months ago, I couldn't leave my apartment. I'd been through 4 counselors who treated me like a case study. Sarah made me believe I wasn't broken. She saved my life. "You want a story?" He turned toward the camera. "That's your story. She saved my life." The cameraman hesitated, his lens shifting, capturing instead of Sarah. One by one, the voices rose. Maria spoke of her survivor's guilt. Jimmy admitted she had given him tools to hold back the darkness. Others described small victories that felt enormous: sobriety, sleep, the courage to hold their children again. Jennifer, professional smile slipping, looked around, realizing the narrative was slipping from her hands. She'd come for a clean arc. But what she was hearing was raw, messy, real, and better than anything she had planned. Tried to regain control. Regardless of her impact, the fact remains, Ms. Martinez, her application. That's a violation of federal regulation, grounds for termination. A new voice cut through the tension, firm, confident. Actually, it is. All eyes turned. A woman in a sharp navy suit stood in the doorway, followed by a younger man carrying a briefcase. She stepped forward. My name is Attorney, Veterans Legal Aid. This is my colleague David Park, specialist in federal employment law. Jimmy's eyes widened. His voice cracked with pride, his daughter. His heels clicked against the floor as she took her place at the front. We've reviewed Ms. Martinez's application. She checked the veteran status box. She provided her DD-214. The omission of detailed service history does not constitute falsification under federal law. Any attempt to fire her would constitute retaliation. David Park opened his briefcase, producing documents. And retaliation, in this context, is a violation of the Protection Act, especially given the evidence of systemic deficiencies in the VA's mental health services. Face paled. Deficiencies. Our services meet all federal standards. Jim spoke up, pulling another set of reports from his stack. Standards. You call 60% treatment failure a standard. 4 counselors before finding someone effective. Sarah's methods succeed at 90%. 90. Tell me, whose standard are we supposed to trust? The one on paper or the one saving lives? Tank rose from his chair, towering, commanding. His voice shook with restrained emotion. You want to know what she's been doing? She treats us like soldiers, not victims. She doesn't coddle, doesn't pity. She walks with us, that's why she matters. She's been fighting for us every day, and now we fight for her. The room erupted. Not applause, not cheering, but a low rumble of voices. Veterans agreeing, standing, taking positions like they'd done 100 times before. Jennifer finally raised her hands. Wait, maybe we're approaching this wrong. Maybe the story isn't about one person. Maybe it's about all of you, about what's happening here. The Denver model. The way these programs are actually changing lives. For the first time, Sarah spoke. Her voice was quiet but carried through the room. I'll agree to limited coverage on one condition. The focus stays on the veterans, on their recovery, not me. And if the VA wants to parade us on TV, then the funding better follow. Expand these methods. Give other VAs the same chance. Opened his mouth to argue but silenced him with a sharp look. She wasn't winning. Not today. The room was against her. The story was shifting. I suppose, she said tightly, we could explore that approach. Sarah's chest loosened slightly. The room still felt like a battlefield, but for the first time, it was one where she wasn't fighting alone. When she left that night, the wooden box sat openly on her desk. No more hiding. Around it were photographs, weddings, graduations, newborns, family reunions. Gifts from patients whose lives had turned, whose paths had shifted. And for the first time in years, Sarah let herself wonder. Maybe survival wasn't the end of her story. Maybe healing was. But deep down, she knew battles never ended clean. Not in war, not in life, and certainly not here. The fight was just beginning. Why did the silence of her own apartment feel louder than the chaos of a battlefield? By the time the Denver VA quieted down, Sarah had become something she never wanted to be, visible. No longer the rookie, no longer the mystery in the hallway. Veterans nodded to her with respect now. Staff glanced with new caution, some with admiration, others with envy. The brass didn't try to push her into interviews again, not openly. But she knew they were still watching, still calculating. The compromise had worked. Limited media coverage, focused on the veterans, not on her. The Denver model was the phrase reporters used now. Her name rarely appeared, but her face was everywhere in the VA. Every patient who walked through her door carried the weight of stories that no statistic could capture. And the results were undeniable. Suicide attempts plummeted. Attendance soared. Veterans who had cycled through 4, 5, 6 counselors before were staying, week after week, willing to face their ghosts because she sat across from them with steady eyes and scars they didn't need to see to know were there. Her office became something more than a room with 2 chairs and a desk. It became a bunker, a refuge, a place where veterans came not just to talk but to breathe. And yet, at night alone, Sarah's apartment was silent, too silent, the kind of silence that wasn't peace but punishment. She lay awake staring at the ceiling, hearing echoes, shouts, gunfire, screams muffled under rubble. She felt the sting of smoke in her lungs that wasn't there, the phantom heat of flames that had long burned out. She touched the scars on her arm, her temple, her side, and told herself the same lie. It's over. But the lie didn't quiet the nightmares. By morning, she painted her face with calm, pulled her hair into its neat ponytail, and walked back into the VA like she was untouchable. She knew how to hide exhaustion. She'd been doing it since the desert. Tank noticed, of course. He saw everything. One evening, when the halls had emptied, he lingered outside her office. She was bent over paperwork, the lamplight casting shadows under her eyes. "You're not sleeping," he said flatly. She didn't look up. "Neither are you." He stepped inside, shut the door behind him. "Difference is, I don't pretend I am." Her pen stilled. Her hand trembled barely, but enough. Tank's gaze caught it. "You can't keep carrying us and think it won't tear you apart," he said quietly. Her jaw tightened. "They need me. They need you alive, not hollowed out." He hesitated, then added, "We've all got ghosts, Doc. You tell us to face ours. Maybe you should try it sometime." She didn't answer, didn't look at him. But when he left, she sat in the quiet for a long time, the words echoing louder than she wanted to admit. The next morning, she found waiting by her office door with a stack of books in his arms. I signed up for classes," he said, eyes darting nervously. "Counseling program. Thought maybe someday I could do what you do." Sarah blinked, startled. That's incredible." He shrugged, trying to hide the pride in his voice. "Figured if you could do it, maybe I could too." Maria started a peer support group for women. Jimmy began mentoring younger vets, sharing pieces of his past he'd kept buried for decades. Even Tank softened, becoming the anchor of group sessions instead of the storm. Around her, lives were shifting. Healing wasn't linear, wasn't perfect, but it was real, tangible. But for Sarah, the cracks widened. Late one night, she pulled the wooden box from her shelf, set it on the table, and opened it. The metals glinted in the dim light. Bronze, silver, purple ribbons stained with desert sand. Her fingers traced the 5th purple heart, the one that ended her career. She remembered the blast, the fire, the smell of her own burned flesh. She remembered the faces, always the faces, the ones she saved, the ones she didn't. Her phone buzzed on the counter. A message from Maria: "Meeting went well, thank you." Another from "First class tomorrow, wish me luck." And another from Tank: "You're not alone, Doc, don't forget that." She stared at the words until her vision blurred. Then she closed the box, locked it again, and whispered to the empty room, "I haven't forgotten. I just don't know how to let go." The next week, her office was more crowded than ever. Veterans from out of state had started arriving, asking for her by name. The VA administration tried to funnel them into other counselors, but they insisted. They wanted the woman with the scar on her temple, the one who never flinched. The whispers grew louder. The rookie was gone. In her place was something else, a soldier still on mission. But every mission takes its toll. During one group session, Sarah found her focus slipping. Maria was speaking, her voice steady, her words strong, but Sarah's vision blurred. The walls seemed to close in, the air too thin. For a split second, she wasn't in the VA. She was back in Helmand, kneeling in the dirt, blood soaking through her hands, a voice screaming in her ear, "You promised I'd be okay." Her breath hitched. She blinked hard, forced herself back. Nobody noticed except Tank, his eyes locked on her, sharp, assessing. Afterward, when the room cleared, he lingered again. "You froze," he said. "I didn't," she replied too quickly. He leaned closer, his voice low. "Don't lie to me, not after everything. You froze just like the rest of us. Welcome to the club." Her chest tightened. She wanted to deny it, to push him away, but the truth was in her silence. Tank studied her for a long moment, then said softly, "You keep telling us we're not alone. So why the hell do you keep acting like you are?" She had no answer. That night she dreamed again. The faces blurred together, soldiers, civilians, voices she couldn't quiet. And when she woke for the first time since her discharge, she wept. Not for herself, for them, for all of them. The medals sat on her shelf, gleaming in the darkness. But in that moment they didn't feel like honors. They felt like anchors. And Sarah Martinez realized something she hadn't dared admit until now. Healing others wouldn't save her forever. Sooner or later, she would have to face herself. Why did the strongest person in the room look like she was about to break? On the surface, everything was working. The Denver model was spreading. Reports came in from other facilities adopting her methods. Suicide attempts down, compliance up, lives turning. Sarah became a symbol, even when she tried not to. Veterans asked for her by name. Young counselors studied her sessions like lessons in a new doctrine. To everyone else, she looked like a leader, a trailblazer. But inside, she felt like an imposter. She told them every day, "You're not alone." Yet when night came and the silence pressed in, she was alone, more than she'd ever admit. The ghosts came harder now, not as shadows at the edge of her dreams, but vivid, merciless. She heard the mortar before it hit, felt the ground shake, saw the faces of 19 she carried to safety and the 23 she couldn't. Their eyes never left her. Their voices never softened. "You promised," they whispered. "You promised we'd be okay." She'd wake gasping, drenched in sweat, her chest tight with the guilt she carried like shrapnel embedded too deep to remove. One morning, Tank cornered her in the staff kitchen. He handed her a cup of coffee without a word, then leaned against the counter studying her. "You look like hell," he said. "So do you." "Difference is," he replied, "I stopped pretending a long time ago." She sighed, lowering herself onto a chair. "Tank, I don't have the luxury of falling apart. Not here, not now." "Luxury?" He shook his head, incredulous. "Falling apart isn't a luxury, Doc, it's human. You think you're carrying us by being perfect. Wrong, you're carrying us by being real, and right now, you're not." Her hands tightened around the mug. She wanted to argue, but the truth in his words cut deeper than any rebuke. Later that week, during a group session, the unraveling showed itself. The veterans sat in their circle, sharing wins, setbacks, raw truths. Maria spoke about leading her women's support group, beamed about passing his first exam. Jimmy told a story from Vietnam he'd never shared before, his voice trembling but proud. Then it was Sarah's turn. They looked at her expectantly, waiting for the counselor's steady reflection, the words that always seemed to cut straight to the heart. But this time nothing came. She opened her mouth and froze. The words caught in her throat, trapped behind the weight pressing on her chest. The faces came back, unrelenting. The boy no older than 19 bleeding out in her arms. The mother screaming for her child in a marketplace turned to rubble. Her breathing quickened, her vision blurred. She gripped the arm of her chair, desperate to stay grounded, desperate not to collapse in front of them. "Sarah," Maria's voice was soft, worried. Tank leaned forward, eyes sharp. He saw it, he knew. "I'm fine," Sarah forced out. Her voice sounded foreign, brittle. "I'm fine." But she was. After the session, she stayed behind, head in her hands, the empty chairs around her like silent witnesses. She didn't hear Tank approach until his hand rested gently on the back of her chair. "You can't keep this up," he said quietly. She lifted her head, eyes red. I don't get to fall apart, Tank, not in front of them. They need me strong. They don't need you strong, he said. They need you honest. Do you think we don't see it? You sit there telling us to face our demons while you run from yours. You think we don't notice the way your hands shake when you think no one's watching, the way your eyes go somewhere else when you hear a sound too close to memory. Her voice broke. If I let it out, if I open that door, I don't think I'll come back. Tank crouched, meeting her eyes. His voice softened in a way she had never heard before. You will, because we won't let you face it alone. That's the point, Doc. You're not the only one carrying ghosts. She looked at him, really looked, and for the first time she saw not just the soldier, the patient, the mountain of muscle and anger. She saw the same haunted weight mirrored in his eyes. Different battles, same war. That night Sarah didn't go home to her empty apartment. She went with Tank, Maria, and to a late-night diner. They sat in a booth under buzzing neon lights, eating bad pancakes and worse coffee. They talked not about war, not about trauma, but about stupid things. Movies, music, Tank's terrible taste in TV, his nervous crush on his classmate, Maria's obsession with spicy food. For a few hours the ghosts loosened their grip. For a few hours Sarah laughed, really laughed. When she drove home, the city lights glowing against the dark, she realized something. Maybe Tank was right. Maybe the only way to survive wasn't to bury the pain but to share it, to let others carry some of the weight. But healing isn't a straight line. The next day she was called into office. The chief sat behind her desk, lips pressed thin, holding a letter. We've been instructed to expand your program to 12 other facilities, she said, her voice sharp with the bitterness of someone forced into defeat. Congratulations, you've won. Sarah didn't answer. But understand this, leaned forward, eyes cold. You've made enemies. You embarrass this administration. You think veterans rallying in a room will protect you forever. It won't. One mistake, one crack in your armor, and they'll come for you. And next time I won't be outnumbered. Sarah walked out without a word, but the warning stayed lodged in her chest like a splinter. That night she dreamed again. Louder, clearer, not just the faces but the sounds, the screams, the fire, the silence after. She woke gasping, clutching the key around her neck, her body trembling. And for the first time, she whispered to the empty room what she'd never admitted out loud. I can't do this alone anymore. Her voice cracked, her tears fell, but in that breaking came something new. The first fragile thread of release. Why did her voice falter when she told them, "You're not alone"? It had always been her mantra, her promise. The line she spoke to veterans trembling in her office, drowning in memories they couldn't shake, and until now she believed it for them. But when Sarah whispered it to herself in the dark, it rang hollow. The days moved forward anyway. Her office never stayed empty. Maria's group flourished, thrived in his classes. Jimmy laughed again, really laughed for the first time in years. Tank became her shadow, not to intimidate but to steady, the kind of quiet presence she hadn't realized she needed. But Sarah's cracks widened. Warning played in her head on repeat, one mistake and they'll come for you. And she knew it wasn't just a threat, it was a fact. The weight of expectation pressed harder. The veterans needed her. The administration watched her. The whispers outside the VA still painted her as a hero, even though every night she felt like a fraud. And then one afternoon, the dam broke. It happened in group therapy. The circle was full, the energy fragile but hopeful, shared about a paper he'd written. His professor called it remarkable. Maria admitted she'd gone 3 days without a panic attack. Jimmy confessed he'd walked through fireworks last weekend without hitting the ground. Sarah listened, nodding, her pen tapping against her clipboard. She should have felt proud, victorious. But instead, the sound of Jimmy's voice blurred, Maria's words slipped away, the excitement faded. Because in her mind, another voice was louder. A 19-year-old private, clutching her arm, blood pouring between her fingers. His lips pale, his eyes terrified. "Don't let me die, Doc, please, don't let me die." She told him he wouldn't, she promised, and then he was gone. Her chest tightened, her breath caught. She dropped her pen, her hands trembling. Sarah, Maria's voice cut through, worried. Tank straightened, eyes narrowing. He knew. He always knew. Sarah opened her mouth, but the words tangled in her throat. She pressed her palms to her eyes, trying to will the memories back into the box she'd locked them in for years. But the box had shattered. The ghosts were pouring out. The room fell silent. Veterans who had always seen her as unshakable now watched her shake. Finally, Sarah whispered the words she had never spoken in public. "I lied." Her voice cracked. Her hands lowered, revealing tears streaking down her face. "I tell you every day you're not alone. I tell you it's okay to carry guilt, to face it, to talk about it. But I don't. I bury mine. I bury it so deep it eats me alive. And I can't." Her breath hitched. "I can't do it anymore." No one moved. The silence stretched, raw and heavy. "I remember all their faces," she said, her voice breaking open. "The 19 I saved, the 23 I didn't, the ones who bled out in my arms while I told them they'd be okay, the civilians, the children. Every night I see them. Every day I hear them. And her hands trembled, I don't deserve to be here when they're not." Her confession shattered the room. For a long moment no one breathed. Then Tank stood. His massive frame loomed over the circle, but his voice was soft, steady. "You think you're the only one." Sarah looked up, startled. "You think you're the only one who carries faces you can't forget, the only one who counts numbers in the dark. Every one of us in this room has ghosts. Every one of us has made promises we couldn't keep." His voice thickened. "You tell us we're not broken, that we're not alone. Why the hell do you think that doesn't apply to you?" He turned to the others. "How many nights do you see it again?" Swallowed hard, "Every night." "Maria." Her voice shook. "Every time I close my eyes." "Jimmy." The old man's gaze was steady, his voice gravelly but firm. "Every damn day since 1968. Tank faced Sarah again. "See, you're not the exception, you're one of us. Stop pretending you're not." Sarah's tears fell freely now. Her walls, the ones she'd built with precision and discipline, crumbled in front of the people she thought she had to protect. But instead of judgment, she saw something else in their eyes: recognition, relief, gratitude. Jimmy leaned forward, his voice softer than she'd ever heard it. "Doc, you think less of us for breaking down, for crying, for carrying ghosts." "No," she whispered. "Then why do you think we'd think less of you?" The words struck like lightning. She had never considered it. She had always assumed her role demanded invulnerability. But maybe the opposite was true. Maria reached across the circle, taking Sarah's trembling hand. "You saved us by being strong, but you'll save yourself by being honest. Let us carry you the way you've carried us." The circle tightened. His hand joined Maria, then Jimmy, then Tank's massive grip, firm and grounding. For the first time since her discharge, Sarah sat not as their counselor, not as their savior, but as their equal. A veteran, a survivor, a human being who hurt like they did. She let out a long, shuddering breath, and in that moment something shifted. Not the disappearance of ghosts, not the erasure of pain, but the beginning of release. Later, when the group dispersed, Tank lingered as always. He stood by the door, arms crossed, watching her pack her things with slow, deliberate movements. "You did good today," he said. "I broke," she whispered. He shook his head. "No, you let us see you, big difference." Her eyes burned again, but this time with something softer: hope. Tank leaned closer. "You've been telling us healing isn't about being fearless. It's about being honest. Today, you finally believed your own words." Sarah's throat tightened. She nodded once, unable to speak. When she walked to her car that night, the air was cool, the city lights glowing against the dark. For the first time in years, she didn't feel the shadows pressing as hard. They were still there. They always would be, but they weren't hers alone anymore. And as she touched the key around her neck, she thought of the faces, not just the ones she lost, but the ones in her office, alive, breathing, healing. Maybe that was enough. Why did the end of one war feel like the beginning of another? Months passed, but the ripple of that day in the circle never faded. The day Sarah Martinez broke and discovered she didn't have to heal alone. Her office changed. The walls filled with pictures not of medals or ribbons, but of lives reclaimed. Wedding photos mailed from grateful families, snapshots of new bobbies held by fathers who once doubted they'd live to see them, graduation caps tossed into the air by veterans who'd gone back to school. Each picture was a victory, not hers, theirs. The wooden box, once hidden under spare tires and shadows, sat openly on her desk now. It no longer felt like a secret. It was part of her, but not all of her. Around it, thank you cards, children's drawings, letters from strangers who'd heard about the Denver model and found hope in its echoes. The VA, forced by undeniable numbers and the voices of veterans who refused to be silenced, had expanded her methods to a dozen facilities. And everywhere they spread, the results followed. Lower suicides, higher compliance, the smallest signs of life returning to those who had thought themselves lost. It wasn't perfection, it was progress, and for Sarah that mattered more than medals. Tank became her anchor, the immovable presence in group sessions, the steady hand when tempers flared. Veterans who once feared him now leaned on him. Thrived in school, balancing textbooks with his own sessions, determined to walk the same path as Sarah. Maria's support group grew, her quiet courage sparking change among women who'd carried their silence for too long. Even Jimmy, hardened by decades of ghosts, softened into a mentor, his gravelly voice guiding younger veterans through storms he knew all too well. They had formed a unit, a family stitched together not by rank or orders, but by survival and the fragile act of choosing to heal. And Sarah, once the rookie, once the secret, once the woman who hummed outside a locked bathroom door, found herself leading a different kind of mission. Not with weapons, not with orders, but with presence, with scars that spoke louder than lectures, with the simple truth, you're not alone. But late at night the ghosts still came. They always would. One evening, after the last session ended and the halls quieted, Sarah sat alone in her office. The medals glinted under the lamplight. Her hand hovered over the fifth Purple Heart, the one that had ended her service. Tank appeared in the doorway, leaning on the frame. "You're still here." "So are you," she answered without looking up. He stepped inside, lowering himself into the chair across from her desk. "You still see them, don't you?" She nodded slowly, "Every night." His voice softened, "So do I." For a long moment, they sat in silence. Two soldiers bound not by rank or mission, but by ghosts that refused to fade. Finally, Sarah whispered, "I used to think healing meant forgetting, or at least burying it deep enough so no one could see. But it doesn't, does it?" Tank shook his head. "Healing isn't forgetting. It's learning to carry it without letting it crush you." Her eyes burned, but she smiled. "You sound like a counselor." He chuckled low and rough, "Don't tell anyone." They sat there, the silence no longer suffocating but steady, a reminder that some battles don't end, they change. Weeks later, Sarah stood at the back of a crowded hall, not a battlefield, a graduation ceremony, walked across the stage, shoulders squared, head high, receiving his diploma. He turned toward the crowd, searching, and when his eyes found Sarah, he lifted the paper like a salute. Her chest swelled, not with pride for herself, but for him, for all of them, for every soul who had walked into her office convinced they were beyond saving and walked out believing otherwise. The ghosts still lingered, they always would, but now when they came, she no longer faced them alone. The weight was lighter, spread across many shoulders. That night, as she locked her office, she paused to look around one last time. The photos, the notes, the box of medals no longer hidden. She realized something she had never admitted, even to herself. She hadn't left the service. She had simply found a new way to serve. Not on the battlefield, not in uniform, but here, in rooms filled with broken voices and trembling hands, in hallways that smelled of coffee and disinfectant instead of sand and smoke. Her war was over, but her mission continued. And for the first time since coming home, Sarah Martinez felt exactly where she belonged. She turned off the light, the words forming softly in her mind, the kind of truth you don't shout but carry like a quiet compass. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.